Hey everybody, it's Christina Quick, the Tarot Biz Mentor here from the Profitable Psychic Business and Divination Academy. Welcome to today's video. We are going to be continuing on. It is the beginning of March, but the world kind of went topsy-turvy last week. I just didn't have the emotional energy to talk about such, because the next couple of videos in our soulmate series is going to be, we're going to kind of talk about some of the dark stuff. And I just didn't feel with the way last week was going and things going on in the world that, I wanted to add any more, darkness. But we are back. And by the way, before we get started, today's video is going to be on false twins and dark twins. But before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that I am going to be at the Kansas City Metaphysical Fair March 11th, I believe. It's not this Saturday, but it's next Saturday. So I'm probably going to be up there a little bit later in the day, probably more towards close. I'm probably going to go for like the last hour or so, maybe the last 2 hours. I'm actually meeting Madam Z up there. You guys know Susie Zern. She's one of my best witchy friends, and we've been clients and best witches for a really, really long time, years and years and years now. So if you're going to be in the Kansas City area, it's at Harrah's in northern Kansas City. So if you are going to be there, or if you are in the area, just leave a comment below and let me know, and I will get with you so we can arrange, saying hi and meeting in person. That would be really, really cool. So today we're going to be talking about the idea of false twins and dark twins. So a false twin and a dark twin, they are very, very different, but it can be kind of difficult to assess or discern what kind of twin that you're dealing with. So hopefully this video is going to give you some ideas of what a false twin is and what a dark or malevolent twin is. And false twins are, it sucks to go through a false twin relationship, but it's nowhere near the damage and chaos that a dark twin relationship can have in your life. So it's good to know about both of these because a false twin can certainly turn into a dark twin. Okay. So one of the last videos that I had done was the soulmate ascension process, the twin flame union process. And so if you haven't watched that, you might want to go back and watch that first. Also, there is a video called Soulmate Extension Process Contracts. Contracts is something that I've talked a lot about during this series. Contracts are the most important part of the twin flame union. And so that's really important to understand that. So contracts, the contract is in the twin flame union is basically saying, yes, do you want to be my twin flame? I want to be your twin flame. And then agreeing to that. Right? A twin flame union cannot happen. Nobody can be your twin flame and vice versa unless or until that contract is negotiated. All right. So the contract is the really, really important part of what happens when things go wrong, and the most important part to identifying a false twin. So the process of going into a soulmate / twin flame union, going on this journey sounds great and all, and for a lot of people it is great. It's one of, there's a large amount of people out there who have decided that this is going to be like their biggest adventure of their lives, and they know that they want to be twinned. They know they want to be in a twin flame relationship. They just know that they want to do that. It's in their heart. But, and it is great. It is a fantastic journey, but it is very hard and difficult as well, and it's not for everybody. But what can happen is that things can go very, very wrong, despite even having the best of intentions, right? So what happens when a twin is downgraded to a false twin, or even downgraded and demoted back down to a potential soulmate? Maybe, right? What happens is that the contract basically cannot be negotiated. So just to recap, that contract is where you get with your twin and your potential twin, and you talk about all of the things that you feel that is important to your future and important to your relationship. This is the time to talk about marriage, the idea of children, career, where you want to live. You're talking about your hopes, your dreams, your goals, things that you want to accomplish and manifest in your life. And if this other twin is on board with that, then the contract can go forward. But for many twins, it takes a lot of time, sometimes several years. For me and my twin, it took us about 6 years or so of dating in order to negotiate our personal contract. So that's how long it took us to reach some sort of compromise within the relationship, right? So what happens is if you can't find that compromise, what happens if your goals, hopes, and dreams are just so vastly different than this other potential twin? Or what happens is one of the first stages on that twin flame journey is the first stage is that yearning stage. And I talked about that in that video where it's that stage where we're beginning to separate ourselves from what I call the grid or the matrix, which is basically the collection of societal, cultural, parental type of expectations, right? That in society, these expectations that are kind of projected and placed upon you very early in your life. And it's like this program that you like, you're expected to fulfill all of these duties and, like go to college, finish high school, go to college, meet someone, get married, buy a house, settle down. Like there's these culture, that's like the quote unquote American dream. But every culture and every society, every country kind of has its own, gauntlet of things that you're supposed to be doing as an adult in this life, as a productive member of society. Well, for light workers, it's a little bit different from us because we don't really fit into that grid and we never really have. Things like buying a house or things like going to college, might be boring to someone who identifies as a light worker until they have awakened their divine life purpose and figured out what their divine life purpose is, right? All of that really changes once you tap into your divine life purpose. But for most of us, a lot of empaths and psychic people and light workers are out there just kind of roaming around aimlessly and wondering why we don't fit in, right? And so that first stage of the twin flame journey is removing ourselves from that grid and realizing that we actually don't have to fit into this grid. And so we go on this hero's journey, right? For me, it was moving 2,500 miles away from everything I've ever known and starting a new life somewhere with all I could pack into a car with my potential twin at that point. Excuse me. And your journey doesn't really have to look like that. Your journey can look very, very, very different. You don't have to move or do anything like that in order to start your hero's journey. That's just what it looked like for me. But what can happen is sometimes the priority of getting away from the grid it's just impossible for some people. They are so entangled and intertwined in this grid. It just depends on how programmed you have been. And there is a risk reward ratio. So this idea of separating ourselves from the grid means that for most of us, we're not going to be relying on family financially anymore. We are any which way that we experience some level of privilege from our family in order to survive. It is something like we're basically shunning that and going off on our own, right? For some people, they just can't manage to do it. Their family means too much, or they're so deeply embedded in their culture that, there's people that despite their best intentions can't remove themselves from the grid, not completely and not to the extent that can really ignite the twin flame union. That's not to say that all potential twin flames have to remove themselves from the grid. If you and your potential twin flames, like in arranged marriages, right? Very popular in some parts of the world still. If you can find a twin flame within an arranged marriage, you consider yourself very, very lucky. That doesn't work out for most of us. I mean, that again is like a very small minority amount of people that it tends to work out that way. But for a lot of people, the act of removing oneself from the the confines of our family and reprogramming our limiting beliefs and figuring out who we are, going on our own hero's journey, is a really big part of the process. And if one twin is prepared and fully ready to do that, but the other twin is not prepared to do that, then the contract cannot be negotiated. On the other hand of that, another reason why a contract cannot be negotiated is not necessarily familial influences or cultural or societal influences, but simply that that person has experienced a very, very high level of trauma. And when that happens, we all know that trauma is extremely difficult to work through. It's something, it's a choice every single day you wake up and choose, am I going to be a victim of my trauma, or am I going to work within what I have been given and try to change it, transmute it, alchemize it into something beneficial that I can help others with. And that's the Lightworker mission, the Lightworker Creed. And unfortunately, some people are just so, and I hate to say it this way, damaged by that it's extremely difficult for them to pull themselves out of those programs and limiting beliefs. It almost becomes like this spiral, this void of darkness that kind of, it's very difficult to, it takes on a gravity of its own, right? It's very difficult to pull oneself out of it. And sometimes this comes across as like, you're, for example, one really popular reason why twin flames get demoted down to false twin flames is because of infidelity, right? The inability to be monogamous, if that's in the twin flame contract, right? Again, twin flames can be monogamous, they can be polyamorous, but I'm just giving a simple example that I would say a lot of us can actually relate to. Because there is fidelity in polyamory as well. That's not necessarily saying that open relationships are just, oh, woo, it's open all the time, come and go as you please. That's not exactly how polyamorous relationships work, at least not, some of them don't necessarily work like that. Let's see. But unfortunately, sometimes the potential twins, they just can't come to an agreement. They can't come to a compromise, right? Actions are not matching up with words. So the twin in question, especially the one that is like, in the sabotaging position in the relationship, the one that's breaking the code is, it's really interesting because it's almost kind of like, okay, so I've talked about this analogy before with the binary star system, right? And you're spinning around one another and you're being pulled into each other's gravitational forces. And it's like soon you're just like, really fastly orbiting one another, and it gets really intense really quickly. What can happen is if the things that are discussed in the contract and still in this period of negotiation and you're in this like trial period is what I call it, where like, okay, you've said what your contract is, you've said what your contract is. Now let's see if we can live up to those contracts. It's that trial period before there's some kind of ceremony or marriage or something like that officially, we're together now, right? We're taking our vows. We're saying, yes, we actually want to do this. There is that trial period that kind of goes on between that. And during that trial period, if someone is not keeping their word or measuring up to the contract that was set forth, these are sacred agreements, then unfortunately the contract cannot go forward. And at that point, the intensity of the relationship, it actually becomes violent. The energies become very violent within one another, and you start to actually repel one another. You start to like slingshot each other away from one another, and you repel one another. And that magnetism that brought you so close before becomes uncomfortable, and you just got to get out of it, and you got to escape it. And that usually happens, and there's a break in the relationship. And the good news is that false twins are, I mean, it sucks to go through spending years with someone only to realize that their trauma is more important to them, or that their addiction really to their trauma, their addiction to their victim mentality is more important to them than the relationship. And really, we have to understand that that's a trauma response in most cases. That person needs a lot of help. They need therapy. In a twin flame relationship, it's really interesting because we kind of become one another's life coaches. We kind of do have a therapeutic role in one another's lives, but we, unless you are a therapist, are not a therapist. And there's all sorts of ethical dilemmas about, playing therapist with your relationships and playing therapist with your family and stuff like that. There's a whole bunch of ideas about what that is and what's okay and what's not okay. But that's what that is. A false twin is basically still in that trauma response, and they're unable to break free from that. And you have to realize as a person who fully went into the relationship expecting that it was going to go forward into a union, you have to realize that it's not your fault and there's nothing that you could have done to change that. And then that's something that that other person has to change within themselves. They have to value that risk reward, right? We talk about this a lot, especially in spiritual life coaching with our clients. What is the risk? What is the reward? And what is more appealing to you? Are you willing to take that risk in order to achieve that reward? And for some people, unfortunately, their trauma is a better gamble than releasing the trauma. And why is that? Because unfortunately, we our identity is made up so much of our trauma that it's very scary to form this new identity without that trauma, or with that trauma but in alliance with the trauma, and to transmute it into something better for ourselves. But we can be, it is possible to be completely codependent on one's trauma because it is such a huge part of our identity. And if someone can't visualize an identity outside of that trauma, it's very, very difficult for them to let that go. Okay. So I'm sure some of you are nodding your head. I've been there. You've been there. We've all been there. And it's a personal choice. It really is a personal choice, whether the sabotaging twin decides that the risk reward of their family is too great. They don't want to separate themselves from the grid, or they are still driven by their trauma programs and they can't figure out how to get out of that, and they're not interested in seeking help or going to therapy and stuff like that. The reality is that being in a twin flame union is a privilege, right? It's not a right. It's a privilege, and it's something that two twins have to consciously work towards every single day. It's a choice. Like every single day I wake up and I choose to be present in my relationship. I choose to challenge any programs that are running that are sabotaging. I choose to be a part and a party and an ally in this relationship. And that's a choice. And if your twin, your potential twin, is not making that choice, then unfortunately consequences must follow. And one of those consequences, the biggest consequence is separating, right? You go through that separation stage. And that kind of leads us into the catalyst, the other stages of the relationship. But we do need to be sensitive to that. I think it's difficult to love someone fully and give your heart to someone and commit to someone only for them to not be able to place priority and do the same. It is hard. But the good news about false twins is that you can figure out a lot of this very quickly. There's this rhetoric out there that's like, especially for feminine identifying people, or what I consider to be the runners in the relationship. The feminine people there's this like, this thing where, don't try to, get your person that you're dating to go to commitment too fast. You don't want to scare them off and things like that. This takes a total mindset rework that is really necessary if you want to be successful in seeking out a twin flame union. You do need to lead in with these really, really, really big conversations. The right person that is ready, because there's nothing worse than spending 3 years, 6 years on someone who was never ready to begin with and who told you from the beginning that they didn't want commitment. They told you they weren't looking for that type of relationship. There's a lot of ego involved when we're chasing after people, right? Or when we're trying to match up with people. And one of the best pieces of advice that I can give you is listen to what people say when you first meet them, that they will be honest. People 9 times out of 10 will be honest about where they are at in their lives and what they're looking for and how open they are to being in a committed relationship like this versus just, dating like in the muggle world, right? So a lot of the whole pain can be avoided with false twins in the beginning stages of the relationship. In my opinion, be upfront. Tell people exactly what you're looking for. Tell people that you're dating, tell them I'm looking for a life partner, right? I'm looking for someone to share my life with. I'm looking for someone that I can be with, that we're going to help one another, right? And we're going to be best friends. We're going to be partners in this life, ride or die kind of partners. And if that scares someone, then you need to take that as that they're not ready and they're not in a place where they can even really consider that right now, right? Timing is everything, especially when it comes to um, awakening, when it comes to being able to put yourself in a position where you can deal with your trauma, where you can go on your spiritual awakening type of thing. Um, it can also be very traumatic if, say, for example, if a false twin, there are things outside of the relationship that can result in a false twin as well. And these are usually catalyst based. For example, losing a child or losing a parent, these more traumatic type of catalysts that happen. Not all catalysts are bad, but some of them can be. And sometimes they're just too great and it's too painful. The relationship cannot be repaired. Okay, so those are things that can happen. And in this case, the false twin doesn't really have a malicious intent. And actually, in most cases, the false twin does not have a malicious intent. They didn't sign up for this relationship going, haha, what can I get out of this person, right? That goes more into what a dark malevolent twin is. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that now. So you have false twins and you have dark twins. Dark twins are a whole other thing. They're a whole other beast, and they are people that have malicious intentions. And it's good to be very aware of what dark twins are. And they are basically, they're narcissists. That's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but they are narcissists. They're psychic vampires. So dark twins are basically professional level psychic vampires. They are people that infiltrate spiritual communities, looking for good-natured people, specifically looking for unevolved empaths. And by unevolved empaths, I mean an empath that is still playing into those savior loops, is still playing into those martyr, has that martyr syndrome where they still feel like they have to sacrifice themselves for everybody because nobody else would do it, right? So it falls onto the empath, and then they go through these periods of being burnt out, right? And so psychic vampires are people that specifically target our communities, specifically target spiritual communities, even churches and things like that. They're looking for good-natured people. And what they do is they basically charm you into giving over your psychic life force energy to them. And they will tell you things like, they're also sometimes even very occult oriented, meaning that they know about numbers and they know about occult signs and they know about psychic phenomena. Some of them might even be magicians themselves, okay? And they will tell empaths things like, I saw you at this time and I knew it was a sign. Or you tell them about your dream and they're like, oh my gosh, I had the same exact dream. We must be soulmates. Or they'll say things like, do you feel this intense connection between us? I've never felt this before. And here's the thing, is that these statements are not necessarily negative. They aren't harmful in and of themselves, but the intention behind them to manipulate an empath into feeling that the connection with the psychic vampire is more spiritual than it actually is. Like, they're utilizing this idea that empaths believe in numbers and signs and psychic phenomena, and they're just basically making it up. And they're trying to manipulate the empath into a close relationship with them. And what they really ultimately want to do is they want to create a relationship of codependency with this empath because they get some type of power out of it, right? They get what is called narcissistic feed, and they use techniques like love bombing, gaslighting, hovering, ghosting. So they use tactics like love bombing. Okay, love bombing is where you meet someone meets you and they're like, oh my gosh, I love everything about you. You're so smart. You're so pretty. And they're just like gushing about you, right? And then the moment that you do something that they don't like, you're like, the worst person in the world, and they turn on you. They flip the switch and they start blaming you for, all the things that are wrong in their lives, right? Or all the things that you're keeping them from having and all the things that are wrong with you, right? There's also, it's like bait and switching. There's also hovering and ghosting, which is where this is a really, really insidious tactic, and it mostly happens. So as the relationship progresses, the psychic vampire or their dark twin is basically feeding off of the insecurity of the empath. The dark twin is intentionally making the empath feel like they are crazy, right? They're gaslighting them. They're like, "Oh, I didn't say that," or "Why did you do that?" When I did, they intentionally find things to rile the empath up, and this creates that negative, chaotic energy within the empath, and this literally feeds the dark twin. It feeds the psychic vampire. They get off on it. They love that control. They love that your world is spinning. They love that you don't know up from down, left from right. They love this control that they have over you, especially this codependency they have, and they use these manipulation techniques. So what this does is it raises more and more chaotic energy within you, so they have more to feed off of. And the more chaotic your energy is, the less secure you are, the more that they can control you, right? So so if this happens and you're in this narcissistic psychic vampire empath, negative vortex, right? You find yourself into this. What happens next is that they take it to a dysfunctional level. That stuff's already dysfunctional. It's emotional manipulation, right? But there's this whole other dysfunction where the intimacy between the you and the potential twin flame becomes very, very violent, and there's subtle aggression, there's overt aggression, and it becomes very, very harmful and very abusive. And again, this is more and more narcissistic feed and supply for the dark twin. And also what happens is the ultimate goal is to basically put the empath in a position of submission, so that the dark vampire will always have this measure of control and dominance over the relationship. And what you'll feel it too, and it mostly happens through intimacy, because you'll feel it in your solar plexus and your sacral and your root chakras. You'll feel that's where the dark twin or the psychic vampire starts to put cords of attachment into your solar plexus. And so you'll find, like, if you have a clairvoyant reading or something like that, you'll find that in a lot of parasitic type of relationships, psychic relationships, that the clairvoyant is able to see those cords of attachment from the dark vampire to the empath. And you can go through, there's whole cleansing modalities that you can go through, ritualistic baths, reversing candles. Also there's the gray rock technique, right? When you're dealing with a narcissist, and really to get rid of a narcissist quickly, you no longer become a source of feed and supply for them. So look up gray rock technique if you think that you might be dealing with that. And let's see if I've forgotten anything else. Now, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about my personal experiences. So I have had a false twin. A false twin, that was one when I was fairly young, right? And me and him, we had been going through this relationship for years and years, about 3 years on and off, right? And on the surface, we really got along great. I mean, his family loved me. Our goals and everything that really lined up. We had a great intimate connection. But where things felt off, and I mention this because it doesn't necessarily have to be big red flags, big signs that, this is not going to work out. They can be small, subtle signs as well. So as I was dealing with this, I just noticed that I felt really comfortable with this person, and I really definitely felt like he was my soulmate. And like I said, his family loved me. My family loved him. We got along great. We basically never fought, but there was something missing from the relationship. And at that point, we kind of decided to just go back to being soulmates. We didn't feel like there was, it was really more me. And I think I probably broke his heart a little bit. But I didn't feel like the future, because we had a future kind of planned out. My thing was, I wanted to go to school to be a teacher, and I wanted to just have a daycare, and I wanted to be like a stay-at-home mom. And that was the future that I saw for myself with this person. And he was totally on board with it. And the dream just felt a little too small for me. And anytime I tried to bring up something else or something bigger, he would shut down. So that's how I knew that potential twin flame union wasn't going to happen. I also had a situation where I had a dark twin. And the reason why I know so much about dark twins is because I've been through one. And I remember he would use certain things, like he would play certain games with me, like psychic games with me, and he would manipulate me, and I just knew he would. Like, we would like play games, like try to read each other's mind, very innocent games just for fun, but the manipulation was always there, right? And he would do this ghosting and hovering thing where he would hover for a long period of time, where he would be here and he would be present, and he'd be in this relationship, and then one day he would suddenly be gone. Like he would just take off and he'd be gone for 3 months, call me 3 months later. That's the ghosting technique. So pay attention, especially to the gaslighting, the love bombing, the hovering, and the ghosting tactics, okay, of dark twins, because that is what's really going to show you. It can feel weird. Sometimes you don't know if you're just crazy or if your own trauma is at the wheel driving this and sabotaging the relationship on your behalf. You don't know. But these tactics that dark twins use are very clear cut, and they just are. Either they are happening or they're not happening. So if they are happening, I suggest looking more into the whole narcissist and codependent relationship and looking into gray rock technique. And as always, do this safely. Being in a relationship with a dark twin can take a very, very negative turn, and it can be unsafe. So do what you need to do in order to make yourself safe before you break off the relationship. And hopefully you're seeing this video in time before you get involved with the dark flame like I did back in the day, back before I met my true authentic twin flame. I didn't have these resources available, and I wish that I had, because I maybe would have saved myself a lot of heartache, and I probably would have handled the situation a little bit better. So anyways, this has been dark twin flames and false twin flames. If you would like to share your experience, I'd love to know more about how you feel about this. Have you ever been through a false twin relationship? Have you ever been through a dark twin relationship? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.